The emergency chamber hissed as it opened, spilling a wave of biting air into the sterile corridor. A plume of frost drifted out like a ghost exhaling. Nurse Vel'tren stood at the threshold, its 6 fingers twitching against the tablet clutched in its right hand. The being's pale violet skin darkened slightly in concern as it peered inside. The figure on the slab was still breathing. Barely. Status? Vel'tren asked, directing its voice toward the med assistant drone buzzing quietly overhead. The drone beeped. Subject 442 species, Homo sapiens core temperature, 28.3 Celsius. Severe hypothermia. Subject was discovered outside sub-Arctic Research Zone 8, clothed in multiple thermal layers and found conscious. Vel'tren blinked. Conscious, the drone word in affirmative. Vel'tren stepped into the chamber and approached the human. The man lay curled beneath a thick thermal blanket, face flushed red at the cheeks, nose stark and pale, lips cracked. His clothing, now removed and folded neatly on a bench, was strange layer after layer of cloth, some synthetic, some organic. The outermost coat was ragged, patched with mismatched materials, yet still intact. Boots were caked in frozen mud. Vel'tren tapped the tablet. Subject designation, Darren Graye, the drone answered. Darren stirred, coughed once, and opened his eyes just a sliver. Is the coffee ready? He murmured. Vel'tren leaned slightly closer. You are safe. You were found in freezing temperatures. Please do not speak. Your body is recovering. Darren blinked groggily. Yeah, I figured. Can't feel my fingers. Motor function is impaired. Expected with your condition. How long were you exposed? He chuckled, then winced as the movement sent a spike of pain through his chest. Hard to say, couple hours. Maybe 6, lost track after the snow started blowing sideways. Vel'tren's hand twitched again. You were mobile in a blizzard. Had to move. Shelter blew over. You did not freeze to death. Clearly, Darren said with a dry rasp. Vel'tren turned to the drone. Increase thermal infusion. Start limb circulation stimulation. Monitor cardiac stress. Yes, nurse. Vel'tren studied the human. Your species lacks biological insulation sufficient for survival in sub-zero environments. How did you endure? Darren's eyes fluttered shut, then opened again. Layers of clothing. The alien paused. Explain. Darren gave a weak grin. It's simple. Wear enough layers and you trap your body heat. Each layer holds air. Air insulates. Start with thermals, add fleece, then a windproof shell. I had 5 layers on my torso, 4 on my legs. 2 pairs of socks, gloves inside mittens, hood under a hood. Add movement and you can last longer than you'd think. Vel'tren tilted its head. Movement, with limited energy reserves, had to keep the blood flowing. Otherwise, I was going to become a popsicle. Vel'tren turned back to the tablet and logged the data. It made no sense. The human should have succumbed to hypothermia within an hour. The med training protocols it had studied on Terran physiology clearly stated such exposure was lethal. Yet this one had managed through bizarre and apparently effective means to walk out of a snowstorm still alive. Darren coughed again, harder this time. Can I get water? Vel'tren signaled the drone. Hydration, room temperature. No more than 50 milliliters at intervals of 10 minutes. Darren took the sipper cup with shaky hands and sipped. His breathing slowed slightly. How bad is it? He asked. Vel'tren hesitated. Mild frostbite, lower fingertips and toes, internal temperature dangerously low upon arrival. You will need extensive rewarming and observation. Possible tissue loss, but you are stable. Darren nodded. Been worse. Vel'tren stared. Worse than freezing to death. Fell through lake ice once. Middle of nowhere, Wyoming, alone. That was worse. The nurse's fingers twitched again. Over the next 2 hours, Vel'tren supervised Darren's rewarming. The human drifted in and out of shallow sleep. Occasionally, he muttered. Once he asked if the Packers won. Vel'tren did not ask for clarification. Later that cycle, another nurse entered the chamber. Vel'tren, you are being summoned to Central Recovery. A Vexari diplomat has collapsed. Suspected allergic reaction. Vel'tren nodded. Understood. This human monitor his vitals and initiate dermal scans for frostbite progression. Do not interfere with his clothing. Why not? Vel'tren glanced at the pile of garments. We may need to study it. 3 cycles later, Darren was sitting upright, propped against the headrest of the medbed. He looked pale but alert. His voice had returned, though still hoarse. So, you're telling me your people never invented parkas? He asked, poking at the bowl of nutrient paste with a stylus. Vel'tren stood beside the bed, reviewing a new scan. We have environmental suits, engineered for each biome, not layers. Yeah, well, layers are cheaper, easier to replace. More forgiving, too. You just add or remove depending on how cold it gets. Vel'tren tapped the tablet. Your internal temperature has returned to acceptable levels. However, your extremities remain at risk. We will need to monitor for necrosis. Right. I figured when my toes turned that nice purple color. You are not alarmed. Oh, I'm alarmed. I just know panicking won't help. Vel'tren paused. Your calmness, does it stem from experience? Darren looked away. From necessity. He didn't elaborate, and Vel'tren didn't press. Later that day, 2 alien researchers arrived. They carried scanning equipment and a clear case containing Darren's clothes. Vel'tren gestured. He is awake. You may ask your questions. The taller of the 2 researchers leaned forward. Darren Graye. We are conducting a study on human thermal resilience. May we examine your clothing? Darren raised an eyebrow. You already took him apart, didn't you? The researcher hesitated. We performed non-invasive scans, Darren sighed. Sure. Knock yourselves out. They laid out the garments and began scanning each layer. Vel'tren watched as Darren explained the purpose of each item. Synthetic inner thermals to wick sweat, fleece for insulation, nylon shell to block wind, and an outer parka filled with down feathers. The researcher stared at the parka. These, feathers from a non-sentient avian species, goose down, traps heat real well, been used for centuries. Primitive, the researcher muttered. Effective, Darren shot back. Vel'tren noted the tension and cleared its throat. His survival indicates the method warrants further study. Darren leaned back. You know, for a species that builds ships that bend space, you'd think you'd have figured out how to stay warm. We rely on technology, one of the researchers said stiffly. Yeah, I noticed. You don't exactly pack for emergencies, Vel'tren interjected. Your use of redundant layers appears to compensate for technological failure. That is, adaptive, Darren grinned faintly. We call it being prepared. Over the next week, Darren remained under observation. The frostbite on his toes and fingers was monitored closely. The medics used localized warming and tissue regeneration stimulants. One toe, the smallest on his left foot, began to show signs of necrosis. A minor amputation was scheduled, and Darren accepted it grimly. No way around it, he asked. Vel'tren shook its head. We have preserved function in the others. This one is beyond repair. You will be sedated, Darren sighed. Do what you gotta. The procedure was quick and clean. Recovery took days, during which Darren was confined to bed rest. The pain, though managed, left him irritable and quiet. Vel'tren noticed the change. You are upset. I lost a piece of me, Darren said bluntly. That's never fun. You survived when others would have perished. Doesn't mean I don't get to be pissed about it. Vel'tren nodded once and said nothing further. By the 3rd week, Darren was walking again, albeit slowly and with a limp. He insisted on dressing himself, returning to his now cleaned layers, Vel'tren observed. You are not required to wear them here. The facility is climate-controlled. Doesn't matter. These saved my life. I'm not tossing them aside. Do you believe your survival was due to preparation or luck? Both, Darren said. But mostly preparation. You can't control the storm. You can control how ready you are for it. Vel'tren studied him. We do not often understand your species, Darren smiled. That's mutual. Silence lingered for a moment before Vel'tren spoke again. Your methods will be documented. Perhaps future missions will benefit. Take it from me, Darren said, adjusting his layered jacket. Never underestimate the power of a good pair of socks. The 4th week was when Darren started asking for tools. Vel'tren found him hunched over the edge of the diagnostics table, one leg propped on a rolling stool, the other braced awkwardly on the floor. The human had scavenged a utility panel from beneath the table and was prying at it with what looked suspiciously like a dinner fork. You are not cleared for strenuous positioning, Vel'tren said, moving closer. And that is not a sanctioned instrument. Darren glanced up without pausing. I'm not putting stress on the foot, and the fork's just leverage. The real tool's stuck behind the panel. Vel'tren blinked twice. "What are you doing? Trying to fix your heat distribution unit. This side's been blowing cold air since yesterday." "I told the drone, but it just offered me a blanket. You are not a technician." "Not officially," Darren said, finally dislodging the panel with a sharp crack. "But I rewired half a cabin's worth of electronics last winter with duct tape and a car battery, so I think I can handle this." Vel'tren watched as the human reached into the exposed cavity and tugged gently at a wire bundle with his unbandaged hand. "If you electrocute yourself, I will not file the report." "Fair." Darren tapped at a small fan with the utensil. It whined, then spun to life with a soft hum. "There we go. Probably a stuck bearing. Your fan units run hot. Dust builds up." Vel'tren folded its lower arms. "You are aware this is a medical recovery room?" "Yeah, which makes it weird that the heating system's got a cold draft aimed right at the bed. Not exactly optimal for tissue regeneration." "You are under observation, not assigned to maintenance." Darren leaned back against the table and exhaled. "I get bored, and if I'm gonna sit in here with one foot wrapped like a Christmas roast, I might as well make myself useful." Vel'tren stepped closer and peered into the now open panel. "You identified the cause visually." "Smell helped too," Darren said. "Burned dust has a signature. Reminded me of the time I tried to heat a garage with a toaster oven. Long story." Vel'tren considered for a moment, then walked to the wall console and tapped a few commands. "The thermal readings have stabilized." "You were correct. Guess I earned my pudding today." "There is no pudding," Darren sighed. "Right. Still not over the fact that your food paste has the texture of warm glue and no discernible flavor. It is nutritionally complete. So is cardboard, technically." Vel'tren closed the panel gently. "Do you often repair unfamiliar systems without instruction, often enough to stay alive?" The nurse paused. "That is not standard behavior." Darren looked at his foot, still elevated and swaddled in a smart trap. "Neither is surviving a blizzard with a busted shelter and no backup." The room was quiet for a beat before Vel'tren asked, "What failed?" Poles snapped in the wind. "Tent collapsed. Buried in snow, I dug out, but everything wet froze solid. Had to keep moving to stay warm." "You were alone," Darren nodded. "It was a solo survey, mapping glacial shifts. I sent a distress ping, but the storm jammed the uplink." Vel'tren watched him carefully. "Most species would not venture alone into an unstable environment." "I figured the risk was manageable," Darren said. "Calculated margin of error, but weather shifted fast. By the time I realized it, I was in it." "You calculated incorrectly. I lived." Vel'tren did not reply. Instead, it moved to check the readings on the wall monitor again. Muscle regeneration was progressing. Circulation in the affected foot remained within acceptable parameters. The smallest toe was gone, but the rest of the limb had stabilized. "You're not used to patients who tinker with your equipment, are you?" Darren asked. "Not without prior certification." He grinned slightly. "Well, if you need a heating consultant, I charge by the hour. You are not permitted to bill the facility. Figures." That evening, Vel'tren returned with an odd-looking toolkit and set it beside the bed. "What's that?" Darren asked, leaning forward. "Diagnostic interface for environmental systems. You may assist under supervision." Darren's eyebrows rose. "You're letting me fix things. You are confined to quarters. This may prevent further unauthorized tampering, or it might make the place run better." Vel'tren tilted its head. "That remains to be seen." 2 days later, Darren had recalibrated the airflow in the corridor outside his room, adjusted the lighting frequency to reduce glare on reflective surfaces, and rerouted a backup power conduit that had been buzzing faintly behind the wall. Vel'tren stood with a technician from facilities who reviewed the changes silently. He did that with improvised tools. "Yes." The technician scratched the side of its eye ridge. "We've had a ticket open on that light flicker for 5 cycles." Vel'tren said nothing. On the 5th week, Darren was cleared for short walks beyond the recovery wing. Vel'tren accompanied him, citing both medical supervision and, unofficially, curiosity. They passed through a communal zone where several species had gathered. A tall, feathered being with a narrow snout and iridescent crest glanced at Darren, then turned to its companion and whispered something. The other being, a squat, quadrupedal creature with blinking ocular stalks, responded with a sound that resembled a hiccup and a bark. Darren leaned toward Vel'tren. "They're talking about me, aren't they?" Vel'tren hesitated. "You have become a topic of discussion. Because of the frostbite, because of how you responded to it." Darren stopped walking. "They think I'm reckless." "Some do." He looked around. Several eyes turned quickly away. "They don't get it. They lack context." Darren shifted his weight onto his good foot. "I didn't go out there to prove something. I did it because someone had to record the melt line data before the next cycle. We've already lost 2 markers. That section might collapse in a season." Vel'tren studied him. "Do you regret it?" "No, I regret the gear failure, not the goal." They resumed walking slowly. At the far end of the hall, an observation chamber displayed planetary survey feeds. Darren paused before one screen showing a storm front rolling across a jagged ice shelf. "You know," he said, "it's not just about surviving, it's about understanding how to survive next time." Vel'tren folded its upper arms again. "You intend to return to field work, eventually. You are missing a toe." "I've got 9 more." Vel'tren blinked. Darren tapped the glass of the observation chamber. "Besides, I've got some design adjustments in mind. The next shelter won't be using aluminum poles. You are altering the structure based on the failure point." "Exactly." Vel'tren nodded once. "That is logical." A soft chime from Darren's armband interrupted them. He checked it, then glanced at Vel'tren. "Hydrotherapy session. You are scheduled for joint mobility exercises." "Right. Gotta keep the limp from becoming permanent." They turned back toward the medical wing. Later that evening, Vel'tren reviewed Darren's case file. Beside the sequential vitals and recovery logs, it added a note. "Subject demonstrates adaptive problem-solving independent of formal instruction. Survival instinct integrated with mechanical improvisation, recommending further observation of behavioral patterns in post-trauma recovery." It hesitated, then added another line. "Subject appears to approach adversity not as obstacle, but as design flaw to be corrected." Vel'tren closed the file. In the corridor outside, Darren was hunched over a wall panel again, muttering to himself. "Didn't think to check the filter intake. Rookie mistake." Vel'tren approached. "You are not authorized to modify the ventilation system in shared spaces." "I'm not modifying it, just cleaning it. The airflow's uneven. Someone's gonna catch a sinus infection." "You are not a physician." "Neither are you." "But you look the part." Vel'tren blinked once, then crouched beside him. "Fine, show me the blockage." The hydrotherapy basin was warmer than Darren expected. He eased himself in with a sharp hiss through his teeth, adjusting his grip on the handrail. Vel'tren stood nearby with a data slate, observing as Darren lowered both legs into the waist-deep water. Small ripples moved outward in slow arcs. "You were advised to enter gradually," Vel'tren said without looking up. "I am entering gradually." "This is me being gradual," Darren muttered, bracing himself as he bent his right knee. "Feels like dunking into soup someone forgot to season." Vel'tren tapped a few entries. "The temperature is calibrated for circulatory stimulation." "Not flavor. I wasn't planning to drink it." A low vibration started beneath the basin, and streams of tiny bubbles began rising from the floor. Darren leaned back slightly, letting his arms float. His shoulders sagged. "All right, I take it back. This is almost nice. Mobility in the affected foot must be tested during the session. Begin with flexion." Darren raised his leg, toes breaking the surface. The bandaged stump where his smallest toe had been was still tender, but the swelling had gone down. He began rotating his ankle slowly, stopping when a tight pull in the arch made him wince. "Too much?" Vel'tren asked. "I'm good, just tight." He paused, then added, "Stiff like an old hinge. The tissue is adjusting to the absence of structural balance. Your gait will compensate over time. Guess I'll walk with character now. You will develop lateral compensation, not character. Let me have the poetry." Vel'tren remained still. Darren switched legs and flexed again. Water sloshed gently. "I talked to one of your engineers this morning," he said after a moment. "The one with the vertical pupils, Hessian. She asked me how I'd know when a wire's live without a scanner, and your answer, lick your finger and touch near the insulation." Vel'tren's head turned sharply. That is not an acceptable diagnostic method. It's effective. It is dangerous. So is freezing to death. Doesn't stop us from trekking across ice fields with a thermos and a radio. You are not helping your case. Darren grinned and let his arms float again. She thought I was joking. Were you? Not entirely. Vel'tren adjusted the bubble settings and checked the timer. You have 12 minutes remaining. I've been thinking, Darren said, tracing a swirl through the water. About how you all seem surprised I didn't die out there. You were exposed to conditions known to be lethal to unshielded beings. Yeah, but you've got species that can survive vacuum for 40 seconds and digest pure methane. Yet I wear 5 shirts and suddenly I'm a legend. You did not merely wear garments, you understood their function. You adapted to failure. That is what drew attention. Darren raised an eyebrow. So this is about improvisation. Among your species, it appears common. Among others, it is rare. He sank a little deeper into the water, letting his head rest against the basin's rim. Back home, we call it winging it. Doesn't always work, but it's better than standing still. Vel'tren did not respond. The only sound was the soft churn of the water jets. How long have you worked with humans? Darren asked. This is my 4th cycle assigned to multi-species care. Humans were integrated into the exchange program only recently. Lucky you. Unpredictable you, Darren chuckled. We're not that bad. Vel'tren turned a page on the slate. Yesterday, you rewired a pressure monitor using dental floss and a utensil tray. That monitor was giving false alarms. You were not authorized to correct it. Would you rather it kept screaming every 30 seconds? Vel'tren hesitated. I would rather our systems did not require human improvisation to function. Welcome to our world. The timer chimed softly. Vel'tren reached for a towel and held it out. Darren climbed out with a groan and took it, patting himself dry. You will continue hydrotherapy once per cycle for the next 5, Vel'tren said. Mobility will improve. Residual discomfort is expected. Yeah, I figured. Nerves gotta relearn the neighborhood. An unusual metaphor, better than lateral compensation. Later that day, Vel'tren escorted Darren back to his temporary quarters. The hallway was quiet, save for a cleaning drone polishing the floor. Darren limped slightly, favoring his left side. His movements were smoother than the week before, but still deliberate. When they reached the door, Darren paused. Can I ask you something? Vel'tren nodded. Why are you still keeping an eye on me personally? I'm not an emergency anymore. You continue to exhibit behaviors outside predicted recovery patterns. That's a polite way of saying I'm weird. You are an anomaly, not a malfunction. I'll take it. Vel'tren tilted its head. You also repaired 3 separate systems during your stay. None of which were assigned to you. Yeah, well, I like fixing things. That is not typical patient conduct. Maybe if more patients fixed things, your heating ducts wouldn't wheeze. Vel'tren's fingers twitched, a gesture Darren had come to recognize as mild exasperation. I'm heading back to Earth next week, he said. Transport's finally cleared. They're sending someone else to finish the survey. Vel'tren looked up. You are disappointed? Kind of. I don't like leaving a job half done, but I get it. I'm not at full strength. You will be, Darren nodded. Eventually, he opened the door, then turned again. Thanks for not treating me like an idiot. You are not one. Some people assume that when I start pulling panels off walls. Vel'tren paused. You are unorthodox, but effective. I'll put that on my resume. The door closed behind him. 2 days later, Vel'tren received a package delivered to its station. Inside was a small bundle wrapped in coarse cloth. A note, handwritten in uneven script, was attached. Thought you might want a souvenir. This one didn't burn. Inside the cloth was a glove, one of Darren's patched and frayed, the thumb reinforced with thread that didn't match, still functional, still warm. Vel'tren turned it over in its hands. The fabric was ordinary, stitched by hand, nothing remarkable. And yet it had helped someone survive when the odds didn't care. Vel'tren set it on the shelf beside the medical logs. Not as a curiosity, not as evidence, but as proof that sometimes survival wasn't about the most advanced tools. Sometimes it was just about knowing how to put one more layer between yourself and the cold, and doing it before the storm hit.